Hello there, it's Silver. This is Demon X Machina, or Daemon, depending on how you want to pronounce your Greek letters. Although the X is probably cross, actually, thinking about it. Really, this game has a very complicated name. But anyway, this game came out in February of 2020, originally, on PC at least. It was also on the Switch before that, but this game had a bit of an advantage when it came out because this is an Armored Core-like mech action or mech customization game. However, in 2020, Armored Core didn't exist on PC, and in fact, pretty much the only game like this, the only game of this genre that existed on PC at the time was Mass Builder. And at that time, Mass Builder was extremely very early access. So you could say this game had a bit of an advantage when it first came out because it was a representative of a genre that didn't really exist on PC much at all at that time. Now, of course, since then, Armored Core 6 has come out and is in fact on PC, so I guess the real question is, how does this game hold up and is it worth actually going back to try out? Now, I'm a big fan of mech games of many kinds. I'm a huge fan of like mech sim style games like Mech Warrior and also of the more mech customization type like Armored Core. And I think that more of these games is always a good thing because there are just never enough of them. And this is doubly true on PC where we have far fewer to choose from than any other platform. So the way this game works will be pretty familiar to you if you've ever played one of the more classic Armored Cores. You are an outer, a sort of person influenced by this crazy moon energy that has transformed humanity into its next stage of development, and you pilot a mech called an arsenal. And as far as giant robots go in this game, arsenals are actually on the much smaller end of giant robots. Your human character is about up to the knee of one of the robots, so they're not huge. They actually remind me a lot of like Armored Core 1 and Project Phantasma mechs. They're much smaller. But you've got full control over all the customization options for your mech, and you go on a mission-based structure. You are a mercenary and you're granted a rank, starting at E, and you will then proceed through the ranks all the way up to A and beyond by doing more and more missions. And as you do more missions, you'll gain higher ranks and have access to more stuff. There are two different sort of lines of missions in this game. There's the main story missions, which actually advance the story and have a lot of dialogue and stuff in them. And then there are free missions, where you will do some sort of objective in a more sort of sandboxy environment that is not about advancing the story, but is instead about getting you some new parts and some currency and stuff like that to actually use on the main story missions later. Now, the main point of a game like this is how good is the mech customization, because that's really what you're here for. And in my opinion, it's actually quite good in this game because you have a lot of control over what your mech looks like. You've got head, body, left and right arm as separate slots, so you can have two different arms, as well as legs as one slot. And you also have a processor, an internal slot that usually depends on some small buffs and things, like maybe a fire rate boost or a lock-on distance boost or something like that. And then you've got quite a few different weapons. You've got a weapon in both your left and right hand, as well as the left and right pylon, which are the weapons on your shoulders that you can switch to, so you can swap between what's in your hand at any given time. And you've also got shoulder weapons, like shoulder-mounted missile launchers and railguns and things. So as far as the build variety goes, there's definitely quite a lot to choose from. You'll start out with some really simple stuff, like just an assault rifle for your main right-handed weapon and maybe like a blade for your left hand. It's always nice to have a melee weapon because they're actually quite powerful in this game, and also, of course, they are infinite ammo. And you can't actually hold that much ammo for most weapons in this game. Killing enemies do tend to drop ammo pickups, but depending on what kinds of enemies you're facing, you may find yourself sort of starved of ammo. If you're facing a lot of other arsenals, they take a lot more damage than normal enemies, so you're going to run out of ammo more quickly, so it's nice to have some backups or some extra pylon weapons to make sure that you've got something to switch to. One aspect I really like is that all of your mech's parts are actually individually damageable, so you can be on a mission and have your left arm blown completely off and still be able to complete the mission. You just have to use whatever's in your right hand because whatever's in your left hand is now gone and you can't switch to it anymore. So your mech has quite a lot of different states that it can be in during any given mission, where different pieces of it can get blown off, but they don't immediately end the mission. You can still power through and complete it depending on what you've got left, which is pretty cool. Another thing that I didn't expect is that being in your mech is not actually the only thing you can do. You can climb out of it during a mission and actually walk around as the outer, your human character, well, human-ish character. So at any time you want, you can eject from your mech and just walk around. Now this is of course not the smartest idea in a lot of missions because you can only take a couple of hits in your human form before you die, so your mech is much more durable. But if your mech gets destroyed, the mission doesn't necessarily end right there because you can still walk around. And you do have pretty powerful weapons in your outer form that you can use, including some other weapons that you can get on a skill tree, like big laser blades for arms and stuff like that allow you to actually be pretty successful outside of your mech. So you can even throw like big powerful grenades and put down stunning traps that can stun enemy arsenals and other enemies and stuff. So as a human, you're not totally out of options, and you can actually still complete missions this way. And in fact, there are some story missions where you have to like hijack other arsenals or complete them on foot in some way. The main way that you get new equipment is also a bit unusual. In most sort of Armored Core-like games, you get new equipment by buying it in the shop. Usually, you go through several story missions, which will eventually unlock more new cool stuff to buy, and then you gather up the resources you need, the money and stuff for missions, and you buy it. And that does happen in this game. There is a shop that you can buy stuff from, but that's not where you're going to get most of your gear from. Instead, you actually scavenge it off of dead enemies. So whenever you defeat an enemy arsenal, its body will be left behind, and you can walk up to it and interact with it, and it'll give you a list of all of the armor and weapon parts that particular enemy had equipped, and you can choose any one of the things that it has. Choosing one will make the body disappear, so that's why you can only get one of them. Choosing an armor piece will unlock that armor piece in your inventory once you go back to base for use in constructing your own mech. Whereas choosing a weapon will actually equip that weapon if you have empty space for it. So if you've ejected your left-hand weapon and you choose their left-hand weapon, then you'll automatically pick it up and be able to use it for that mission. And if you complete the mission, it will also unlock it in your inventory for later. The same goes for pylon and back weapons. They will just equip in an empty slot if you have one, but you can still take them if you don't have an empty slot. You just won't immediately equip them, and instead they'll go to that sort of invisible inventory that exists when you're customizing your mech back home. There's also a secondary way to get new equipment that you'll have to do to get some of the most fancy stuff in the game. As you go through the game, you'll unlock the factory, which allows you to sort of research and unlock new gear. All of the armor pieces, including the processor, as well as all weapon slots, are available in the factory for you to research new things. But there's a sort of research tree, you could say. You don't see it as a tree, but it really is one, basically, because in order to research gear, you have to have a certain sort of precursor of that gear, as well as some credits to spend. So, for instance, maybe you want the Garuda 2 missile launcher, which is a nice homing missile launcher you can put in your shoulder slot. Well, in order to research that, you've got to have a Garuda 1 lying around to use for the research. You'll then select the Garuda 2, it will expend that Garuda 1, it'll take it and take it away from your inventory, and then as well as the credits that you need, and then you'll complete one mission, and when you come back from that mission, the research will be done, and you will unlock the Garuda 2. It will now be in your inventory, as well as being purchasable from the shop later if you want to. And then as you go through the game, you'll unlock more factory blueprints and stuff, and you might find that you can turn that Garuda 2 into a completely different missile launcher later on down the line, and further a bit of the research tree. So there's actually a lot of research to be done in this game when it comes to unlocking fancier and fancier stuff. You just have to keep amassing duplicates of other items and then researching them to get new stuff that way. There are also sometimes open slots on items. It can be armor or weapons, and you can find these augments that you can slot into those in order to improve them in some way, like giving them more ammo or giving them more vitality and things like that. They're small boosts, but they are nice. They build up over time when you get multiple things with lots of slots. Now, buying things, especially processors and like shoulder weapons and stuff, can take quite a bit of money, but the biggest money sink in the game is definitely the lab. So at any point you can go to the lab. This allows you to change how your character looks. If maybe you did something in character creation that you don't like and you want to change it, you can do all that in the lab. So you can always change how your character looks and even their voice and stuff. But there's also a skill tree or a set of skill trees that allow you to augment your character using credits that give them new capabilities and improve their capabilities when they're in an arsenal. So this is kind of like a level up mechanic, you could say. You spend huge amounts of credits to augment your character to gain new things. You could have like a much higher ammo capacity for assault rifles, or maybe you have a much higher damage boost for one of your modes or something like that. There are all kinds of them. And there are also, like I mentioned earlier, some that are weapons for your outer when you're walking around on foot, like laser blades replacing your arm and stuff. And the cool thing about a lot of these upgrades is that they actually change how your character looks, because they are physical augmentations that go on your body, they show. One of them may make your eyes glow, where another one produces all of these lines across your face like you're heavily augmented. One of them might replace your arm completely with something else and stuff like that. It's a cool little touch, and this is where most of your money is going to be going, is unlocking these various tiers of performance upgrades. The pace of combat, in my opinion, is sort of like a pre-Armored Core 4 answer level of speed. In other words, you're not that fast, and your machines are a little clunky, and you're just not zooming around the place at super high speed. So if you found the speed of something like Armored Core 6 off-putting, this is a slower game. You can still move pretty fast, but you're not that fast. This is more like a sort of Armored Core 2 and 3 level of speed. Although, even though you're not super fast, you do spend a lot more time in midair in this game than you do in a lot of Armored Cores, where you're mostly rooted to the ground, because boosting in the air takes energy. In this case, boosting in the air does not take energy, so you can actually stay in flight indefinitely, but using your main boosters does consume stamina. You also have a femto gauge, which is this universe's version of Minovsky particles, basically. It's like a magical resource, and you use this gauge for a couple of different things. You have these 3 different modes that you can switch between. You'll notice those sort of red hexes on your shoulders. These represent different modes you can engage that boost different parts of your machine while letting other parts suffer. So one of them will improve your left and right weapons by a lot. They'll do a lot more damage, but your defenses will go down, so you'll take more damage while this mode is active. There's also a shield mode that's the exact opposite. It increases your defensive performance while making you do less damage, but it really does increase your defenses by a lot while it's active. And then there's also the wing mode, which looks cool and allows you to move really, really fast. So if you want big boosts of speed, this is how you get it. And as you're using these modes, their individual gauges will decrease, and as they decrease, they get less and less effective until eventually the gauge empties and the mode automatically ceases to happen, and you go back to the normal sort of baseline mode. Another use for this femto energy gauge is energy weapons. You can find various laser weapons, some like big shoulder beams and railguns and stuff that will use this femto gauge as partial ammo. Oftentimes they also have their own ammo count, but they need femto to actually fire. And then there's the Mirage button, which is sort of like your I need help right now button. You can click in the right stick whenever you want to, and you will create a mirage of your arsenal out of femto. This will quickly drain your femto gauge the whole time it's active, but it basically makes you into 2 of you. So you get a fully functional other arsenal that's equipped with all the same stuff that yours is equipped with that can distract and attack enemies along with you. So if you're facing one particularly tough arsenal, you can mirage yourself and basically make it a 2 against 1 fight. In terms of how the game actually controls and feels, I think it feels pretty good, although I will say it is lacking the weight of an Armored Core game. There's just something about the way the Armored Core games feel to control, even from the very beginning of the series up to now with the 6th game. They have a very specific weight and heft to them, and it really does feel like you're actually controlling these giant mechs. They feel really good to use. This game doesn't feel quite as good to play moment to moment in terms of that weight and satisfaction of throwing around these big machines. I think the weapons overall have a lot less impact than Armored Core weapons. They're still pretty fun to use, but they don't have quite that level of satisfaction, although I will say the melee weapons actually feel quite strong, and you can even clash. If you attack with a melee weapon the same time as an enemy does, they'll clash together and you've got to mash the B button to try and overpower them, and if you can, you'll do a big boost of extra damage, although if you don't, then you'll take the damage. So I think overall with the way the game feels, it feels quite good, but it doesn't have that really deeply satisfying Armored Core level of feel to it, so it's a little bit more floaty, a little bit less weighty. There is a story going on here, and the story is told mostly through communications channels in between mission briefings and also sometimes cutscenes while on mission. And the story it's pretty straightforward, but it's extremely anime. So if you're used to like anime storytelling, this will probably be right up your alley. In fact, pretty much all of the voice actors that you'll hear are in fact anime voice actors. So if you've ever watched the Funimation dub of like any anime ever, then you'll recognize all of the people in this. I think they do a good job of like a mix of sort of scenery-chewing silly villains and fun little motivations and stuff to make the story interesting. The story is not like gonna blow your mind or anything, but it is a good backdrop for fun mech action, which is I think what it's mostly meant to be. It does get very silly and like anime melodramatic towards the end, which I think fits the overall feeling and theme of the game. The game has kind of a dark atmosphere to it the whole time, so having this kind of tragic story that is, like I said, kind of silly and melodramatic, I think fits. And it does make for some memorable missions as the game comes to its close, where you get some good character development and stuff for several of the pilots and the other mercenaries, the other outers that are actually with you. So I do like that the other outers that are with you have a lot of those like classic anime character tropes. They fit well in the game, I think. And this means that even though the story isn't going to blow any minds, it is a fun little yarn that makes for a great backdrop for shooting giant robots. So personally, my verdict for Daemon X Machina, Daemon Cross Machina, is that I think it's actually worth going back to. If you missed out on it when it initially released, I think if you're a fan of mech action games, if you like Armored Core, if you like Mass Builder, if you like this style of mech customization and stuff, there's enough here on offer to actually be a really good time. And even though it doesn't quite reach that pure level of heavy satisfaction that some other games reach, it's still a worthwhile time to play through it. And this is doubly so because they are making a sequel now that was revealed with the Nintendo Switch 2 announcements, and I'm assuming that sequel will eventually come to PC as well, hopefully, although it does look like the sequel is focusing on a completely different style of gameplay because you're not in giant mechs anymore. Instead, they're like Iron Man style suits, it seems like. So we'll see where that goes, but hopefully it is at least as good as this in terms of what it provides. And I think that if you're able to grab this game, especially on sale, then you'll probably have a pretty good time with it. And on a platform like the PC where we don't have tons of games like this, it does stand out as one that's worth trying. So thank you guys very much for watching. I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Daemon Cross Machina if you guys wish to check it out yourselves. And I'll see you next time.